COVID's over. Where have the kids gone? We talking about attendance and disappearing acts on the other side. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. We are without the queen of the show today, but she is with us in spirit and sends her love. We got David, we got Omar, and I am Charles. Happy to be here with you. But you know what I'm more happy about, David? To do this, because it is that young man's episode today. And but I'm gonna let him do his whole thing. However, if we're doing check-ins and all that stuff, I am not the don't leave check-in introductions to me. I'm gonna flub it every time because my heart's not in it. You know, it's not in it, Omar. But I understand it's.
I feel as if like that was the check-in. Like of all the check-in of check-ins, I was like, listen, man, I don't like the check-in. My heart ain't in it. That is how I am feeling this week. Doc is exhausted of check-ins.
I'm exhausted, period. And I am exhausted today, especially. But I also just genuinely hate check-ins. Like, I hate them everywhere. Especially, let me tell you, this is my check-in, and this is fine because Jube's not here, and she can't jump on me about it. I think when you pay people a salary and they get paid thousands of dollars, and these are adults, and you have to check in with them before work starts, I just think there's something wrong about that. I don't know. Was they doing that in Detroit on the Ford line? I have no clue. But anyway, we used to be an honorable country. Never.
I mean, do you want to know what's going on in Detroit?
I know, right?
The Ford line?
I know, man. I know. It's innovative, but also
someone needs
has
to check in with
very
Detroit
criminal.
After the destruction of the American car manufacturing reality. Man, I could do a whole show on just that. Guest sponsoring Eminem as he talks to us about the realities of the destruction of the American manufacturing system. David, brother, how are you doing today? Just a quick hello. How you feeling, dude?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Let's see. We won the lottery. So not the real lottery, but a charter school lottery. You know, my son is going into high school, and we're not necessarily going to attend that school. However, at one point, you know, I had to do some pretty crazy things just to get my kid in a particular school, like become the head of school there for 3 years, or, you know, you'd have to join a board or, you know, do something like that. This is the first time we actually just applied, walking off the street. Great school, amazing program, big school, 2,000 kids, all the bells and whistles at this charter school, all full sports. You know, it's a comprehensive high school.
It's awesome.
Beautiful campus. And we applied, and I'm like, we're not going to get in. Don't get excited. We got in. So that's number one. So I now know what it feels like to get that lucky number. That's the check-in.
Congrats, man. Congrats to you and your family.
What you're trying to tell me is that you and Charlie Bucket have now proverbially gotten the golden ticket.
There you go. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Shout out to you, your child, and the great glass elevator.
There you go.
Love it. Charles, you're exhausted, brother, but I'm really happy to see you, man. Anything that you want to share, that's been cool. So no need for check-in, but like something positive to uplift your spirits that happened to you this week.
2 things. Shout out to my teams. And I have various ones at Energy Converters and then in my consulting joint. David and I are working on this thing, and then Kamar and I have been working on, like, there's just multiple projects that are happening, and I'm kind of a control freak, just a little bit, but I've been coached to, like, you know, let them lead more, and they're great. Kamar is killing it. David is killing it. Appreciate you, David. But it's been good. That's one. And then the other check-in is I had to go travel. Now I can tell you where I was. I was in Arizona. It was like 75 degrees. When I left Chicago, it was 55 degrees. I didn't pack anything. My jacket was this jean jacket. I come back. It's hellishly snowing. Like it is snowing. Like snow is going sideways. This was a few days ago. You know what it was today? It was 73 fucking degrees today. Like I have no idea what is happening with Chicago weather. I have no clue. It makes no sense, like at all. It's like if the Bay Area was just having a manic episode and could snow. It's been we've gone from hot spring to like a snowstorm in the matter of 3 days and back again, and it's crazy. So interesting stuff from my California friends.
Yeah, man. I mean, a couple hot takes. One, damn. Two, you got that hot, dry heat that they talk about in Arizona that exists in El Paso. Three, fodder for our political podcast that may or may not make a debut on March 8th. Global warming, man. Like, how can people sit here and now like deny the fact that like Chicago goes from a snowy winter haven, which is what it's used to Acapulco all in one day? I mean, I'm telling you, man, like people denying this stuff out there. And I'm like, it's a sign. It's a sign we got to do something about it.
Man,
what, like one day made that change?
The sun sets today in 20 minutes. It is currently 68 degrees. Wow. So hey,
February in Chicago. That's insane, man.
It is what it is, man. There you go. Jubilee would be proud of the check-in.
Indeed. I think she'd be very proud, man. We miss her immensely. And huge shout out to our queen, Jubilee. We love you and hope to see you soon. I want to jump right in, fellas, because we got an interesting show today, and I'm happy to get directly into the subject. So our topic today, ladies and gentlemen, is COVID has come and gone, and the statistics of where kids are at, meaning kids have fallen off the charts in terms of not only attendance in our public schools, but even just registration in our public schools. And the big question is, where have they gone? So in a better effort to, as some masters of the podcast have proverbially taught me, to set the table with facts, I'm just going to kind of set the table right now in terms of what is going on. So, David, I know that you've got some screenshots on the text that we sent, the kind of things that I want to share.
Let me know what you'd like to see in particular.
Yeah. So that first screenshot that I sent of the Washington Post line graph, let's get that going up. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? We see a historic fall in attendance. So if you look at El Paso Independent School District, Oakland School District, Minneapolis school districts, New York, you're seeing that public schools are facing a two-front crisis. The first is that we don't know where the hell these kids have gone. And what a lot of the public schools, once again, have done is use charter schools as a catalyst of scapegoating, meaning, oh, it's the charters that are stealing all the kids. In fact, the El Paso Independent School District, our beloved school district here in El Paso, is facing a $1.4 billion. I just want to repeat that, $1.4 billion, $1 billion deficit right now as a result of not just some huge financial mismanagement, but really just like a precipitous drop in their student population. We're talking like the loss of anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 kids. And guys, just for the sake of the podcast and facts, in the state of Texas, particularly in El Paso, let's just say it's 10,000 kids that are gone. That is a $110 million difference in the budget. So as El Paso Independent School District and Canutillo have been models for what's going on around the country, where they have essentially displaced the drop in students to charter schools, we got something else going on here. So as this chart kind of not foreshadows, kind of spoiler alert, COVID happened. And David, remind me, COVID happened around what year?
Oh, goodness. 2021, 2020?
I think it was the 2020, 2021 school year,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, because it's been a little while. And as COVID happened, ladies and gentlemen, we saw that as kids stayed home, as parents got significantly more involved with their children's education, having to, thank you, Crystal, 2020, having to understand more about what was happening, and things started getting converted into online learning. I think parents, and I don't think this is national record, this is anecdotal information, this has now become like empirical evidence, that parents essentially took a deep dive look into what was going on in our public school system, the massive disorganization, taking into account situations like bullying, taking into account Black parents who have felt that public schools disproportionately were punishing them, suspensions, detentions, more than other students, particularly Anglo students. You just saw parents really get disillusioned with what was going on in the public school system, and as a result, started jumping into homeschooling options, as Crystal astutely pointed out in 2020. As you can see in this chart, if you don't see the chart because you're on a podcast, the jump in homeschooling went from, anywhere about like 15% in 2019 to 2020 to a ludicrously large scale increase, meaning where the kids gone, you'll see in the chart that there was an increase, from 2017 to 2019 of parents choosing homeschool. And then this exponential increase from about 15 to 60 plus 60% of parents saying, we're going to make a change in our children's school. And those parents that made the change, over 60% of them chose homeschool over charter school or private school. So as we face a situation in this country where public school attendance and participation is falling precipitously, and we have no idea where they've gone, we have an answer. And where they've gone is homeschool. And as you can see in the chart, in 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23, even though the homeschooling dropped just a bit from 2020 to 2022, the increase overall was ludicrous. Shout out to the BS3 network. Thank you for always hosting us. Thank you for being on the show today. So we're looking at a situation where school districts across the country are losing kids precipitously. And this is the result of parents seeking different options during COVID, but also, as we'll get later into the show, what were the reasons that parents decided to go homeschool over essentially public school? So now that I kind of laid the table, I want to kind of get hot takes from my man Doc and from David. What do you have to say about this precipitous jump in the homeschool population? It's wild, man.
Well, I'll thank you for setting the table. Let me get some size real quick so David can attack the main course. So one, StreamYard sent us a message. There's something that's going on between the latest Google Chrome update and their update. So it just keeps kicking out like it was last week. So I may be in and out, but that's fine. But two, just to answer that, I mean, listen, something that was that like life altering for folks. We've seen these events before in education. I think Katrina was an event where you saw an opportunity for something in education to have drastic, whether you felt like it was good or bad. I think COVID was similar. COVID was a real shock to the system. I think that it exposed a lot inside of that system. I think parents got to sit in and hear the quality of education some of their kids were getting. And I think many of them found new routines and felt like they could do it better on their own, or do it better in their own pods, or do it better in some type of communal homeschool setting. And even before the pandemic, Black families were the fastest growing group of homeschool kids in the country. And that's only been exacerbated with more groups joining. I think that when you have a product that is not meeting the needs of its constituency, and then there's an opportunity where they get to see something else, or me going off on my own can't be as bad as what I'm getting, then this is the result. Right. We lost a lot of young people and they've just not come back. And you have to have parents in on that. It ain't just all these kids that are just cutting and leaving and making decisions. The consciousness of the American people around public education has shifted. And so this is what you're seeing. And if that traditional system, if that public system wants to get those young people back, wants to get those families back, then they have to make appropriate shifts and changes that speak to this new day and age where we are in technology, where the different ideologies are in this country, and we'll see how it goes, because they're not just competing with people having money and going to private schools or a charter school option. You're also competing with technology, which is democratizing the ability to educate kids.
Well said, man. David.
Yeah. I think, homeschooling was like the original form of schooling before like schooling was organized, right? So, homeschooling, in a sense, if you look at the timeline of even humanity, since we started to like live together in, we were not like moving away from like hunter-gatherer society, right? Homeschooling, that's how children were educated, and that's a fact. So I think the period of time that we're looking at is like the last like 100 years, maybe, or 150 years, right? So in the historical timeline, it's a little blip, right? However, this is where we are. My quick take on it is, obviously, yeah, COVID was like the bomb that was dropped into society, right? I think it in an interesting way empowered families to better understand what the possibilities were, right? Like, it's like, oh, our kids aren't going to go to school. What are they going to do? Well, we're going to figure out ways to, essentially, so many families moved into some kind of homeschooling or pod environment during the pandemic. I know our family did, right? We ran a pod at my home for children in the family and extended family. And we're like, wow, we could actually do this. This is doable. Even I didn't think it was something that we could do. I think Charles is right. The technology, the liberation of technology makes it a lot easier, right? You're not relying on textbooks anymore. You don't have to be in the same spaces to meet with, students or teachers. I think the other piece that kind of blew this whole thing up is the kind of racial reawakening that we had in this country as a result of George Floyd and other similar incidents of racial violence, and people seeing that maybe schools are not the best place for Black children or brown children, right? Large public school systems that have historically not been responsive to the needs of our people. And so I think this new wave of homeschooling is definitely more diverse. That's what we're seeing. I think those are some of my quick, just off the top thoughts. There was something else that I had, and it's kind of gone away, but I'm sure it will come back. Oh, so the end result here, and it's not just I'm thinking in terms of California. Omar, you're talking about examples in Texas, but surely in Oakland, in cities like Los Angeles, in cities like San Diego, these big districts are facing multi-million. I said something about San Diego Unified, $100 million cuts.
Yeah, dude.
100 million, right? And so the districts go into this like mode of, you're right, figuring out how to right size. That means closing schools without getting too far ahead. And then the scapegoat game begins, right? Who are we going to blame, right? And in LAUSD and in Oakland and other places, they're blaming the charter schools. They're figuring out ways to push back on that. So I think in 2024, in this like new, and we don't all have to agree on what like universal school choice could look like. There's different variations of it. But I think for all practical purposes, school choice is here to stay, right? And if you are a school system, you're running about the leadership academies, your main job is to make sure that your schools are fully enrolled, right? And it is not to blame the competition, right? And so that's the mindset shift I hope to see with our big systems leaders. Is like, how can we figure out how to better serve families? How can we think about reinventing our schools to meet the needs of children in 2024, right? So I'll stop there. Got a lot to say on this.
You're muted, brother, but we know what you said was just profound.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
There we go. Thanks, man. Just from the facial reactions, I was like, yo, man, I really appreciate you saying school choice is here to stay. And I really appreciate you saying that the school systems need to be reinvented, because like COVID hit. And we talked about this, like, dude, we've talked about this a ton on this show, where like COVID hit and parents were promised jetpacks. Everyone in this country was promised jetpacks. Like, we're going to reform education. We're going to really rethink how we're doing this. We've got to, essentially get incredibly inventive. And then, dude, shit just went back to like the same boring ass, normal bullshit. And it's funny you mentioned this, man, because I'm going to have this exact conversation with teachers this Friday or next Monday, because it dawned on me that I need to kind of share some thoughts that are kind of circumventing my head about, traditionally, a lot of teachers have had the mindset of basically, look, by law, kids have to be here, right? Like, you all have known teachers and you know the mindset. It's like, well, the kids got to be here. So whether they like my instruction or not, I don't care. I got a job, and whether they fail or not, that's their business. That's the parents' business. And that's such a, like, David's laughing, right? Because you've heard that exact mindset. And like, what I need to start sharing with teachers is that, like, those days are fucking long gone, bro.
Way long gone. Yeah.
Dr. Charles Cole was wearing the Oasis headset on this show the other day. Like, that is the future. Kids have not just the option of staying home, but pretty soon they're going to be able to go to school in the Ready Player One virtual reality, where they don't have to deal with bullying. They don't have to deal with persecution. I mean, granted, like, God knows what kind of cyber crap is going to happen, but like, it's not like the old days where like they got to worry about their head getting stuck in a trash can or dealing with racial persecution from a teacher or from a student head on. Kids have options. And the discussion I want to have with teachers is that, like, this is no longer the situation where kids are forced to be here. And it's like, you've got a job and it's secure. Yeah.
I would just say, you said school choice isn't going anywhere. I would argue, I agree with that. I think school choice has been here since day one. I think the issue isn't school choice. Has never been that. I think the issue is people that aren't rich now have the option of school choice. People that don't have the ability to move to a certain zip code to ensure that their kids have the best education. Now those people are having access to these things. I don't think people have ever had an issue with choice. There's always been private school kids or people spending everything they got. And especially if you come from a minoritized community, in a sense where it's like, we've seen that story. Omar has told that story about their parents taking every little dime they had to make sure they can put their kid here, or that star basketball player going to Saint such and such to play ball or whatever. That's not been the issue before. The issue has been, all you other brokies are leaving. Y'all are not coming back. And Oakland has always seen, what's funny about Oakland, Omar and David knows this. for all the stuff you see on Oakland about about on the news, about robberies, about crime, about how poor the schools are and things like that, Oakland has one of the most prominent private school scenes in the country.
Yeah, that's
one
right.
of the most. And so I think that if we really want to get into that conversation, and Omar, these are your conversations that you like, where it's like, things are not normally a problem until those without the means start to be able to do it. Now it's the issue of the day, and it's the issue of education. Now it's the issue how you treat your staff, because those teachers are fed up and they're not leaving, or you haven't set a good standard. It's a lot. It is a beautiful storm of a bunch of things happening at once, and this industry is gonna have to adapt or die, just like everything in life. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I chuckled. I know what you meant when you said that, David, and I fully agree. And I think you all agree too. Oh, that choice has always been there for those that have the means.
Yeah. And I think that the choice here that I really want to emphasize in my discussion with teachers is that the kids have this choice now, meaning like well-meaning parents who understood the implications of where they were going to send kids and stuff. You're absolutely right, Doc. Right now, the kids are like, let me see if I got this straight. I can either go to this boring ass place where teachers treat me like shit. It's boring as hell. I'm not really learning anything. People are talking down to me. There may be, whatever kind of like bullying and persecution going on, and I don't know really what I'm learning here. Or I can go to some super unregulated situation at home, knock this thing out in 2 hours, and play PlayStation for the rest of the day, or hang out with my friends, or go outside, or do chores, or whatever it is that I want to do. I'm like, that is the choice that I think teachers desperately need to understand, is that there needs to be a cost-benefit analysis in the child's mind. That if the school is doing super fun things, the curriculum's dope, you get to see your friends, you're absolutely learning, you're doing real world experience, we're setting you up with internships so that you can have a real world experience in high school, we're doing project-based learning in middle school, the elementaries, a beautiful place of kindness, love, reading, socialness, then it's a no-brainer. Kids are then going to be like, this place is dope, I want to go here, like I don't want to be alone all day. But if your comparison is the old school system, like what the hell y'all think kids are going to do? And I know what they're doing because it's in the chart we just showed.
And I think today's parents are a different, generation of parents that, if they have the means, and sometimes if they don't, will go above and beyond to make sure that their child gets into the school that they desire, right? But I think at the macro level, what we're facing now is across so many large school systems, urban and rural, major enrollment declines, right? And that means like funding declines, and the implications are all there. So the question is like, can the system, is the system and are the systems able to respond, to move towards the kind of schools that you're talking about, Omar, right? And that's the same question we've always had. Like, how hard is it to steer a big system in a particular direction quickly? Because what's happening also at the same time, and charter schools aren't even really part of. I mean, it's interesting. Charter schools have kind of taken a seat at the back of the room, because what's happening now on the other side is a real authentic attack on public education, by the far right, with this, school choice movement that's hitting red states, and it's probably going to hit a blue state near you pretty soon, and kind of opening up the fire hose, right? Just in terms of like unregulated school choice, taking your money putting it into a religious school, taking your money, putting it into a homeschool, right? We haven't talked about the money. Maybe we'll do that after a break, because I think we're going to talk about money right now.
Well, I think it's about partnerships, and I think that we'll talk about the importance of partnerships. But we have a new one, and we like to take a moment really quickly to welcome in our new partner. So let's roll it.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to McDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called McDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the McDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.
So, for those that don't know, and my brother was absolutely, I feel bad for him because he was born in the wrong era. He was a anime kid in the 90s when it was not cool. Anyway, and now, but anime has kind of taken over in McDonald's. And so go and get your sauce. But anyway, thank you to BS3 for that partnership and for the hard, diligent work that they've done that allows us to do this, and our Roku community. Thank you all for continuing to support, because those things don't happen without the support of people like you all. But go ahead, David. You were going in.
I'm just going to transition here real quick to this next graphic, but I will say, just going back to the sponsorship and the support of the BS3 network, you know, you can find education podcasts out there. But again, like, you can find people talking about COVID, learning loss, about microschooling and homeschooling, and you know, all of these things, right? AI in schools. The difference with the South Star Classroom is that you have 4 hosts, people of color, that speak to these issues from the perspective of our respective communities, and that's the different. That's the unique thing about this show. So I just wanted to put that out there. I see a lot of stuff out there, and I'm like, it's the same 5 white dudes talking about, you know, education from, you know, some corporate background, right? That's not
right.
us.
They're like, they weren't in a classroom. They haven't dealt with this from like an administrative perspective.
Exactly.
I feel you.
So that's what makes us different and unique. So thank you to our sponsorship. Omar, would you like me to put this next graphic up here?
Yes, please, because I want to transition to the next question, which is, okay,
we got data.
So the kids have gone to the kids have gone to not private school, homeschool, and I wanted to talk about what are the realities of the homeschool system. And I just want to show a chart. And if you're listening on the podcast, let me kind of tell you a little bit of what the chart's going on. We're showing a percentage increase in the total home student enrollment since 2007, 2018. So since the emergence of homeschooling increasing, it shows a chart of like state by state how much the percentage increase of homeschoolers has gone up. And like, you'll see, if you're looking at the chart right now and you're like, well, what's up with Iowa, Maine, Utah, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, North Carolina, West Virginia, Connecticut, there's no data. It's because those states have 0 laws on record where you have to report that you're homeschooling. I want you to think about that just for a minute, dude. You don't have to report it. So parents could be like, whatever, dude, I'm doing this homeschooling thing. I don't need to report this to the state at all, which is a huge concern of ours in the public school system, because when kids leave, the state of Texas typically is like, well, you have to report where they went. And did they go to another public school because it counts as a dropout? And I'm like, nah, man, like they're just doing homeschooling, but the state of Texas has no system to report it. So in the states that are reporting, and by the way, the Texas numbers are staggering in terms of just the anecdotal data that like journalists like the Houston Chronicle and the Texas Tribune have done, because it's hard to accumulate that data. But if you're looking at the chart, check it out. If not, you'll see places like California's had a 78% increase in homeschool
California
students.
and New York. I mean, New York is 103%. Like I know there's the Rhode Islands, which is 91%, but it's, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, fairly small, fairly small. But densely populated places such as California and New York and DC, to have those numbers, I think that the tides are changing. I didn't mean to jump in on the piece, but I was reacting in real time to these numbers.
The whole point of the show.
I mean, I'm just reacting in real time to these numbers. And again, man, you can't just put a nice little sheen over this stuff and be like, oh, it's just gonna balance out. Like, if you're an education leader, you got to start thinking. You got to use that big old brain and figure out a way. And I know that the purest public education people hate this term, but you got to figure out a way to compete. You have to figure out a way to compete. If you want to be in the game, you got to compete. Every other thing in my life is competing for me in some form or fashion. When I buy a car, they're competing for me. When there are certain services that I have, they're competing for those services. And as an end user, as somebody who gets to choose now, before when I didn't have a choice, but now I have a choice, you got to keep yourself relevant in that game. And do I want to keep going to dilapidated buildings? Do I want to keep going to a place where people aren't learning? Do I want to keep going to a place with inflated grades? Do I want to keep being a part of a system where the professionals within the system can agree on how to measure efficacy in said system? Like, when that in and of itself is a bad term in the religion that is education right now, then you're going to have this type of problem. And we're seeing people are voting, and David knows this statement a lot, just like I do. People are voting with their feet, man.
That's right.
This is where we are.
Yeah, I can't necessarily verify this data, but this is the best thing I could come up with regarding Texas, Omar.
Yes.
It's looking like upwards of almost 250,000 kids in homeschool. And obviously a tripling of that, of the rate from 4.5 to 12%. As a result of the pandemic. So again, like, the pandemic was like this big boom shot, and the rates just went up.
Yeah, man. And I want to get us into what the realities are of homeschool and everything else. And I got two quick things to say about that. Like, one, just again to reiterate what David and I were talking about, when you have 250,000 kids, 750,000 kids in the homeschooling situation, that is over $1 billion loss to public schools. So that's over $1 billion, guys, in terms of the amount of money lost to the public education system. And what's gone on is that Texas, California, a bunch of states haven't remedied the revenue system to make up for such things because they're still on an antiquated system. So you've got school districts in ludicrous deficits. Like I said, EPISD, $1.4 billion deficit, man, trying to recover from this. But I found it apropos about what you said, Doc, in that hey, man, I knew a dude who loved anime in the 90s, and now animes have become mainstream. Homeschool, y'all. Remember? When
you used to be the weird kid. You used to be the weird kid.
It was the weird kids that went to homeschool, and you're like, oh, this is that weird ass homeschool kids, zero social skills and stuff. And I don't want to make the apples to apples comparison. I'm saying with the rise of anime and the popularity of anime, that is an undeniable movement in terms of pop culture. We are seeing a now undeniable trend into homeschool that isn't just if you talk about Malcolm Gladwell's kind of theoretics about statistics and stuff, this ain't just a tiny little population of weird folks in the 1990s that decided to do this. You're seeing such a large scale increase that now you're only going to see further increases with the advent of technology, with the advent of things like, the damn Oculus glasses that I think that's Facebook, and then y'all's the Apple device.
Google's gonna have their stuff. I mean,
bro,
you're not alone.
It's gonna explode.
It used to be a singular thing when you were homeschooling. It used to be by yourself. Like homeschooling doesn't necessarily mean alone anymore, right? Like the kids, like, and it's so funny. There's a piece of cinema from when I was younger called Mean Girls. Remember that like very popular movie that they tried to redo and it did not work out the same. Sorry, but that was the joke in the beginning, was that she was the weird homeschool kid, and she was coming into this public system, and she looked at it like she looked at the Serengeti. Listen, man, you're not the weird person anymore. Like people in anime have found their tribe and they have found each other. And the same can be true for people that want to do homeschool and that used to be afraid that they wouldn't have the resources. They were afraid they didn't have a community behind them. They were afraid, that they wouldn't be able to socialize. And with the internet and it's only getting more accessible and better in that case, people are finding their communities. We are a show. Like what the technology that we're using on this show 15 years ago wasn't available unless you had a studio backing you, unless you had like the way that we're doing live pipe ins and feeds, right? Like things are changing and you either adapt or you die.
And this is basic like streaming technology that we're using now. But 10 years ago, it would have definitely been more challenging. And I think, with the advancement in technology, you could look at homeschool from what we thought about it maybe 10 years ago, and you're right. It's like, oh, it's for the kids that are quote unquote weird or alienated or whatever it was. And now it's kind of become a mainstream thing. And then you think about the proliferation of learning tools, right? And now, if you want to talk about content, it's like the world is totally open. And then flip on top of that, not the advent, but the advancement and the proliferation of virtual, reality kind of like, tools, right? So, we could be doing this podcast in like 6 months in the Oasis, right? In a totally like virtual like environment. And that's a whole other like level of thinking about that. But for young people, this is already a world that they are living in. So that train has like left the station.
It's gone.
It ain't coming back. It's not coming back.
Out the tube, man.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like, in terms of adaptation, this isn't just we need to have extraordinarily more exciting levels of curriculum, project-based learning, real world stuff going on in the classroom, things that are relevant, things that kids are like, dude, this is fun. Like, this is cool, because that social component is absolutely critical. And that's like the biggest, I would say, draw for people, for kids. They want to be social. People want to have that experience. And if they're getting that in the virtual world, we need to think as educators how we're moving forward. And we can't simply have the paradigm of like, look, I'm a Gen X person, Doc and David, I know we've had this conversation about like, get off your phone and go outside and go play and shit. And like, I'm all for going outside and playing and shit, but like, we can't sit here and have the paradigm of, hey man, like this is the way I did it, and we had a pencil and pen, and this is how it was done. It's like, man, if we keep thinking that way, this is going to end poorly for us. But I want to shift into like, what is going on in homeschools? Because one of the major conversations, fellas, that we had recently about the Apple the Apple goggles was that even though the technology exists, I'm having a difficult time as an educator finding software, whether it's in the computer world or the virtual world, right? Like a virtual reality situation or a, digitized curriculum that's like worth a shit. A lot of this curriculum online isn't worth a shit. It's not good. It's boring. It's just not compelling. Kids don't like it. And like, I'm always wondering, and like, we had a conversation with like, that's not up to Apple to create those programs. It's up to people like us to create those programs. And I sure as hell hope that those programs one day exist. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the programs going on right now.
Can you say that real quick? Let me in 90 seconds. I just want to respond to that, because you're right that the technology, the curriculum, the online stuff has not caught up yet. But when it's competition, when it's textbook competition, is calling slaves indentured servants and it's saying that they were happy slaves and we treated them well. when that is what you're competing with, the level of quality doesn't have to be up to snuff. And guess what? That this is the worst it's going to be. Like those things are going to get better. They're gonna hire the Davids, the Charleses, the Omars, the Crystals, the Mama Toyas. Like, let me just say this for Mama Toya, who's on here. She's starting a network of grandmas. Like, and in that network, like they're gonna build certain things and build a nurturing component in it that might also rival schools in certain ways. Like, I think it's gonna start off as supplementing it, but at some point it may overtake it. Like you have to, but if I'm friends with David and Omar, like there has to be something in the appeal where it's like, this just isn't enough. Maybe I visited David's home and I want to be able to play with his kid, or I want to be able to eat his wife's cooking, and I want to be able to share, some tequila with David, right? You can only, what is it that I can only do there? Like you have to build things that I can only do there.
Yes.
And you have to start thinking and build more enriching experiences that can't be duplicated through screens. Sorry about that, Omar, but I want to
no. Hey, look, man, don't apologize. This is the show. Like this is the
I know, but you were cooking, but I mean, but that's what these buildings are going to have to do. What are you offering me that I can't get in this other place?
And I do want to quickly say, we want to be careful because yes, those textbooks say this, but have y'all checked out the textbooks that are going on for homeschoolers?
Oh, I'm not. Listen, I'm not. From a laissez-faire standpoint of just kind of watching and seeing what markets do. I actually have no judgment of any of it at this point. What I'm saying is that there is now places where you can kind of compete in that way. And listen, man. Some people want that shit, dog. Some people want like if you are the old school Confederacy loving kind of person, maybe you don't want your kid getting this new highfalutin DEI-S type of education where everybody's fair. Maybe you want an alternate reality education.
It's funny,
with a South
it's
Warren.
Actually funny you mention that because, like, I'm telling you, and these are some extreme examples for our audience.
I don't think it's that extreme. I know where you're going. Go ahead, yeah.
No. What I'm about to say. There is some highly Christianized propaganda in these textbooks. So like the science textbook talks about men and dinosaurs hanging out at the same time. They're like, we were just chilling by the brontosauruses and shit. And like the picture has like a dude with jeans and he's just like whacking away at shit. And there's the T-Rex and they were just kind of having a conversation and shit. Like it was on the John Oliver show, like for cats that like John Oliver. Like I saw the picture and I was like, what the shit? Like that's amazing. And then there was mention of like this homeschool of 2,500 people that's all about Nazi approved school material.
Yeah.
Nazi approved. Wait, Doc, you're right. Exactly. Yeah. You've got people out there that's like, I don't want this. I want Nazi. Like straight up real Nazi, like quoting Mein Kampf type of shit. Like not type of shit, literally shit. Like your homework is to memorize these passages as written by Adolf Hitler. And this is where I think we're getting into an interesting topic, right? Because homeschool right now is like ludicrously unregulated, y'all. Mm-hmm. Like you can do whatever the hell you pretty much want to do. Texas, there ain't no reporting. You can teach whatever the shit you want to say. Say I'm homeschooling kids. Here's the shit done. There's the diploma. You know, in a bunch of states,
Omar, might Omar be tiptoeing into making an argument or a case for, I don't know, some type of standardized test, maybe that tests general knowledge that maybe we feel everybody might want to have? I don't know. I'm just asking. I'm just saying, is there a case being made that maybe everybody should understand and agree that 2 + 2 = 4? I don't know. I have no clue. I'm just it's an interesting argument you make there, Yanar. I'm just curious. That's all.
I believe you made the argument.
Listen, I was a terrible test taker. I know that this test is not where it needs to be. I'm not making an argument for a test. What I am making, though, is there needs to be standards, and we can't agree on standards. They have never agreed since I have been born and in schools, there has not been strong agreement across the board on what standards are. And you better find some standards quickly, because again, we're about to enter the new wild, wild west. And there's a lot of looting that happens in the early stages of nation building. This is new online nation building. This is new online gold rush. And there are no rules in the beginning. So you better figure it out quickly, because there will be a lot of casualties along that path.
So what you're trying to say is that there's a new world order, and that it's...
See, I ain't going that far. I'm not going that far. We're going to end up on one of those right-wing episodes.
Yeah. I mean,
no,
I
man,
think
the New World Order was a wrestling faction. For those of you,
if you're talking about, so homeschooling, is obviously a thing that's happened for a long time, and it's growing. I think the trick is when you start to see what's happening in particular states that are using public money, right, to fund homeschooling, right? That's where you get into I mean, listen, if you wanted to run a school in Chicago, Charles, or Omar and El Paso, or me here in San Diego, with a wild curriculum, with parents that were crazy enough to send their kids to us, right? So be it. But it's self-funded, right? And you can kind of do whatever you want, right? But when we talk about, public money, putting $4,000, $5,000 into the hands of a family to fund homeschool, that's where you start to have to think about curriculum, assessments. You have to start looking at the structure of it and thinking about, is this a good public investment, right? I mean, imagine you could be funding schools that are promoting hate, right? Or schools that are not promoting any kind of learning, right? I think that's where it gets tricky. So I want to be cautious to not put all of homeschooling into the same bucket. I think there are some, I mean, there have been homeschooling in some way, shape, or form has been used in radicalized political movements in Black and brown communities, right? To teach accurate history, right? Which is not being allowed to be taught in public schools, right? And those are not publicly funded ventures. But I think when we're talking about school choice bills in particular states that say that you can use public money to fund homeschooling, then you have to start looking at the curriculum, right? I mean, you have to.
It's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good show, Omar.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I mean, we're about to wrap up. We've got kind of one last question, and we can kind of use it to give final thoughts and wrap up, which is and Doc already alluded to it, which is, what are the long-term implications for students under these conditions? He was mentioning what happens when you don't have a set of standards? What happens to students? What's going to happen to our economy? What's going to happen to kids? Toya astutely mentioned, what about, parents who are just trying to survive? What are those kids supposed to do? A lot of parents rely on school to provide education, but also provide food, provide time so that parents can go work, because ultimately, they're gone. What the kid's just supposed to stay at home alone. So I think, what do you all think are the long-term implications? And then we can use that to wrap into some final thoughts.
I can go and get my final thought out the way. I think that, well, one, great show. Thank you to our BS3 community and our partners. And Toya, Crystal, everybody that was in the comments, we appreciate you. I think in my final thought, man, I'll use Toya's question to kind of go out on that. What about those parents who are just surviving? I've been a part of that class. I've been a part of that group, and I think survivors survive. I think it's tough. I don't have conversations about fairness. I mean, I would like to, but here's the thing: in nature, the things aren't fair. If you are, listen, if there's a baby cub somewhere and it's unprotected, some predator is grabbing that thing and running away, man. And I think that when you talk about my grandmother or my parents or people that did not have a lot, but poured what they had in there and taught me how to survive in that, that is what's going to continue to happen. I want to just applaud Miss Toya and those people. She is bringing back the aesthetic of grandmothers in schools. A lot of grandmothers are carrying the academic and educational weight and tradition of making sure that their kids get what they need in those schools and being a presence. I personally think that you continue to pour in, you continue to not just survive, but switch that into thriving. And I hope and I pray that we actually expand from that place in the sense of, I want to see more things. One of the most effective classes I had was when I transferred to Stockton, and it was a home ec class. It was just life skills that were in there. I think there are life skills that we are losing as we also tend to lose grip on the sciences and ELA and general math. I also think that, like, you know, being able to do things and build and create food and being able to take care of yourself and building a sense of community, I think those things are important. I think the grandmothers and those people are you know, they hold things together. And so in this, man, I think that people that survive have always survived under bad conditions, but greatness has always come out of it. I got some rough edges. I have a lot of things that's not smooth. As Tupac would say, there's roses that push up through concrete, you know, and the rose that grew from the cement or whatnot. And I think that that's going to breach a new crop of people that's going to help continue to make this place a better place. America is still America, you know what I'm saying, for the time being. And because of that struggle, you have Omar's story, you have my story, you have Jubilee's story, and you have David's. But you also have David, who now has his kid in a different position to be able to have a different type of education. And where would that be able to happen without, not just for David, or not just for his parents, but for his grandparents? And so I just think we got to continue to hold dear and close the things that have made us and shaped us, and not bastardize those things. So thank you, Toya's. Thank you, Omar's great grandparents. Thank you, David's grandparents, for the sacrifices that were made so this man can be up here educating other people on a platform that technology has now afforded us the ability to do, which we couldn't do a decade ago.
Nice, man.
Wow, did you have that pre-written? How did that work out?
Man, that was just off the
wrote the
cuff, man.
question.
That was some good ass shit. We should just end the show at that point.
She just wrote the question. I just answered the question.
Yeah.
Dave, you want to go, brother?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm happy to follow up, man. It's a tough.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think I'll take a slightly different angle to it, but I did want to touch on Ms. Toya's comment. I think you're absolutely right. You know, the minute that I figured out, like, not necessarily a homeschool issue, but like a school choice issue, the moment last Friday that we learned that we had gotten into this charter school lottery, you know, my head went to, like, what about the other kids that didn't get in, right? And so I think that's definitely a real question. I think that's why we have the show. That's why, you know, we do a lot of the work, and we will continue to do a lot of the work that we do to lift up the voices of those you know, young people and families that have historically been the furthest away from opportunity. Like, that's why we come to you every week, and that's why, you know, I particularly choose to, you know, the client base that I work with and the projects that I engage in around these particular issues. So there's definitely a gap. Like, what are those kids supposed to do? What are those families supposed to do? Absolutely. Still an unanswered question. I think the bigger picture for me, and this is where I'm going to kind of like divert, is, you know, speaking to politicians, speaking to governors, speaking to legislators, politicians, lobbyists, et cetera, I still have a very hard time wrapping my head around, I will say, red state politicians that are elected by the people to represent them in what we call government, when they have no issue with selling out their own government, right, in the form of like unregulated school choice bills that we see. So I think everybody should have the right and the option to attend whatever school they want to attend. I believe there should be a certain level of quality. But I do have, and I will always have, an issue with what looks like to be mainly like red state, conservative, right-wing politicians that, again, have no issue selling out their own schools, right? District schools are government-run schools. They are owned and operated by the people. And when we see these politicians just straight up like selling them out and not working to improve them, like that's a big issue for me, much bigger than like homeschooling, right? So and that goes all the way to the top, all the way to Trump, right? So I think if Trump is elected, we're going to see a big boom in particular states in homeschooling. If Biden's elected, we're going to see a big boom in homeschooling in certain areas. It's not going to solve our end issue, right? So I think if we're going to commit to public education, we have to get serious about it and turn it into a nonpartisan issue.
And I'd love to see that. I'm going to take a different
Yeah, I
direction.
can say it. I can hope it, right?
Right.
I know, I love it, man. But like, listen, like I'm all for it. In terms of what are we doing to revitalize this highly democratic, highly, hopefully semi-equitable situation. And like Doc's right, like for those people that have always had that the choice between private school or zip codes, there's always been that school choice. I've always been the guy trying to remark saying, man, I wish that we could just figure out a radically new way of doing this work that makes tons of sense for kids, that's fun, so that we can export this and schools become a place that kids really want to be at. Because like, yo, listen, like I've watched videos from like schools in the 1950s, and Trump and people, even on the blue side are like, no, we got to get back to the way school was. I'm like, school always fucking sucked, dude. Like kids always were rowdy. Kids are always kids. Like school always kind of sucked, and like it was just a matter of middle class kids having extraordinary success because they had the stability of home to get through this. And I think my final comments bridge on that idea, which is I'm a bit of a half glass full kind of guy, not a bit, a deeply half glass full kind of guy. But I'm also objective. So I kind of want to give both versions of this, and that the half glass full is with the advent of technology and my imagination of the virtual world, you could have almost a utopia school system. And they talked about it even in Ready Player One in the book, where like you're in this situation and teachers nor students cannot make any kind of really like bullying or defamating remarks, because those things get filtered through the technology so you don't even hear them, and those people get muted. The classwork is exciting because it's a bit like a video game and it's very experiential. And you could see a ludicrous boom in the homeschooling world. But I want to I want to taper that a bit in saying that's going to be for the haves again. Because yes, like I think as technology increases, it gets more and more affordable. So you'll start seeing a bunch of people have this kind of technology, but you'll see that like this is probably going to be in the hands of your middle and upper middle class because they can afford the technology. They can afford to stay home because there may be one stay-at-home parent that's, supervising, so they ain't running wild. But I also think that like as school systems, personally, as like a superintendent myself, I'd be very dumb to not look at this technology and start thinking to myself, how do I start getting grants and how do I start incorporating this technology into the school system for kids who couldn't afford it so that they can have everything. They can have the technological component, the social component, the sports component, the fun component, the food component. And I think that's the adaptation that schools need to have in order to basically do what Doc quite astutely said, is like, what are we doing that you can't do out there? Like we got the tech, now we've got the sports, we've got a fun social environment, we got a place pretty much free of bullying, we've got, wildly cool competitions. In the high school, we've got internships. And on the flip side, the unregulated version of this homeschooling, guys, frightens me. Because again, it alludes to what Doc was saying. Like, if there ain't no standards, if there's no semblance of like, you need to be able to read, you need to be able to discern a sentence, you need to be able to hopefully think critically, you need to be able to have some semblance of mathematical skills. You're going to keep getting into horrific situations. Like y'all ain't going to be like, you deal with that. How are you going to be ready for the workplace? How are you going to be able to communicate to your colleagues when you've never learned how to like team build? how are you going to understand even a legal document for your home or for your car or for anything else if like your literacy level is so low because you just watch videos the whole time? Like, legal shit ain't ever going to be in a video. And let me tell you why, because legal shit is written in black and white on paper to be confusing. It is purposely done so. So I could see where homeschooling in an unregulated way can have some extraordinarily adverse consequences, not just on the child, but on the economy of the United States if these folks aren't prepared to actually do some like seemingly kick-ass work. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if y'all have any other thoughts. Are we good to go?
Close us out, brother.
Hell yeah,
Yeah, we're
man.
good.
This
We're
has
good.
been the South Star Classroom. Thank you to our viewership. Thank you to the BS3 Network. We are on every single Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We hope that you all have an amazing week, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.